Still just hang on for a minute because people are coming on. Okay, Nick, do you want to start the recording? And we'll kick off. Well, good afternoon to everyone. I hope you're all keeping well. Looking forward to Christmas and of course working from home. Unless, of course, you're working from the pub. That's still allowable. Right, okay, I have with me today, I've got Naomi. Hi, Naomi.
Hello, everyone.
And I have Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hello.
And I've got Gareth. Hi, Gareth.
Hi, you have. I'm not quite sure how I got in here. I had to go and get codes from Microsoft and come in on the browser. So,
oh dear. And we've got Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hello. Sorry, I'm late.
It's okay. We're just kicking off now. And I'm not certain about Kevin. I don't think we've got Kevin with us, have we, Nick? Can you see him?
Not spotted him yet. No.
Right. Okay. Well, Kevin will catch up with us if he's around. This is the last session we're going to do before Christmas. We're not due back until the week after. I think we're not doing the first Monday back, but we'll do start off the week after that Monday. So that's the 3rd. It'll be whatever about the 10th, won't it? So okay. So I wish you all a very Merry Christmas now, because I'm going on holiday in the middle of this week and I won't be back until January either. So right, okay, so what have we got for us for today? Just a reminder to everybody, if you want to join in, just electronically raise your hand and we'll invite you in accordingly. And or you can just type into the message box. Okay, I thought we'd have a look at the stats. We haven't looked at the stats for a few weeks. There's no real great surprises on the stats. They look still pretty much as they were before. The trend is, for working age and pension age CTR, for working age, it's heading downwards at the moment. Pension age is remaining fairly static. I guess that's what you'd expect, isn't it, Gareth? Gareth is frozen. Laura, is that what you would expect? And Laura is muted.
Yes, absolutely. That is what we're expecting. I've actually just filled out a form for I want to call them Hogwarts, Levelling Up Group, whatever they're called now, asking us totally about what's happening with our CTR working age and pension age movement, and it's pretty much where it was.
Yeah. Okay, so so that's the stats. We can look at some of the detail. Just have a look. I see that the numbers of claims starting, they dropped down quite a lot from last year, but on the whole they've remained more or less fairly steady, even though they're a bit down towards that second half of the year. But we normally see claims drop coming into Christmas, surprisingly, and then increase as we come out of Christmas, not surprisingly. The number of those having a calculation is remaining, again, pretty much the same story, and I think that's pretty much the same for the number of claims that are being passed through into the back office systems. That's holding pretty steady for most of the years in terms of the trend. So that's it on the stats. I don't know if Gareth realises he's frozen, but anyway, well, hopefully he'll come back in a minute. Right, if Kevin's not with us, then we're not going to be able to do a council tax and business rates update unless there's anything that you know about, Naomi.
Oh, no. Business rates is not my chosen specialist subject in any way, shape or form. Although I think the MCC got its final nod through last week, but we're still waiting for the allocations. Because without the allocations, how can you define your discretionary scheme?
Yeah. Do we think we'll get that before Christmas, or?
I don't know. I think they're hoping to get something out. There was a meeting. We're part of a group called BenX, and we met with the Hogwarts group, as Laura calls them. And we did impress on them exactly what the problems are for local authorities. It's great that they've started to get some comms coming out, but unless that's managed for us, it will cause a lot of contact from businesses. And whilst we've all been thinking about what we might like to do, without knowing how much we've got, you know, you can't set out what your scheme is for definite. So we ask that if possible, if they can have some sort of managing expectations for businesses at their local authority, that would be great.
Okay, thanks, Naomi. I see Kevin has emerged.
Apologies for being late, guys. Are we talking about the COVID MCC appeal relief scheme there?
We are indeed. I hand you over to the expert.
I wouldn't say I'm an expert. The third reading in the House of Lords took place last week. We believe they're trying to find time for the Queen to sign give the royal assent in between her sherry and mince pies this week, which I noticed Laura's still eating her mince pies. But
no, that's Uma.
All right, yes. We're hoping that will be Thursday, and therefore we don't yet know when the guidance will be issued. You're quite right there. I think it's Naomi, wasn't it? You're quite right that we don't yet know the allocations. We don't yet know the guidance. There are whispers of the name of the scheme will be called, but we haven't heard that fully yet. I think it will be up to local authorities to apply the scheme, but until you know the funding, what do you do with it? How much do you allow? And of course, this is slightly different. I believe that you won't award it to anyone that might have been getting ERD. Now, I use the words might because there are some businesses that might not have managed to apply in 2021. Now you're past the 30th of September date, you can't backdate it. And they're automatically ruled out of the new release because it says could be entitled, rather issues. So it's going to be very, very interesting, certainly from a county-wide point of view. We are looking to get agreement in West Sussex, as far as I'm aware, from West Sussex agreements. But we're looking for a quick turnaround. Member approval, we're not looking for consultation. We're looking for an application form. If they applied to the Valuation Office Agency, and you've got to remember, local authorities got this because the Valuation Office couldn't cope with it. They're applying to the for a appeal. They wouldn't have it remitted in full. It would be a percentage reduction or a reduction, so they still have some to pay. So how are you going to do that, and what are you going to do? And of course, you've got the other issue, the subsidy allowance that will apply. It won't be a cash cap, it will be a subsidy allowance. And so for those of you that are anorex like me, you'll notice there's a bill going through Parliament at the moment on the new subsidy allowance. And therefore, I'd suggest you get this out of the way as soon as possible with the current subsidy allowance before it muddies the water with the new subsidy allowance. Any good news? Means more work, I'm afraid.
Kevin, am I right in saying that we've got some survey we've got to fill out, some questionnaire as well? Tanya went to an IRRV meeting on Friday, and apparently there's something on business rates that we've got some survey to fill out.
I wasn't aware of a survey on business rates. I knew there was going to be a survey on council tax collection, because there's a survey being done about the current review by a House of Commons committee. I wasn't
so
aware.
that I agree with. There's
Yeah.
that one, and then Tanya says there's another one that came out or something.
I
Spoke about
haven't
it on
seen
Friday.
that myself. I wasn't at that meeting on Friday, so I can't say whether that was definitively agreed or not. So
Okay,
it could
I'll
well be
find
the case.
out and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, please, if you would.
So presumably all of that relates to the review of council tax that government announced last week.
Well, you noticed there was a review, but for those who will notice, there was a review in Wales announced.
There was, yes. There's one in Wales and the UK government as well. They want to understand what we're doing with CTR.
Yes, that one could be one where the horse has long since bolted, and they're trying to shut the stable door. Because how do you bring in 300 odd authorities with very, very different and very, very wide-reaching CTS schemes? I think that's going to be a hornet's nest.
Should be interesting.
Yes, yeah, and don't rule out a further, because I believe that they're watching the Welsh thing on wider council tax reforms.
Yeah.
Very interestingly, I wouldn't rule that one out either, because with the
Welsh,
revaluation into 2023, how are they going to actually fund local government going forward?
yeah, and the Welsh one is quite far-reaching, isn't it?
Yes, it is very wide-reaching.
Yeah. Okay, Gareth, no, your camera's not working, but I think your mic is working now. Is that right? Obviously not. Okay.
Can I just go on to business rates, because I noticed you've gone off business rates there a bit, Malcolm, if I may say. Those of you that are watchers of government initiatives might have seen on the 30th of November, they suddenly decided to have a tax administration and maintenance day, where they released a number of consultations and a number of other documents as well. Largely budgetary issues, but they did have the technical reforms for business rates included in there. They did have some very old business grants documents as well, because I know there's certain other new additions they're trying to put through ministers. But one of these was technical reform of business rates that included a number of the announcements made in the budget or the autumn statements, including the new reliefs for business rates from April 2023. It's quite an interesting document. It's really for the business rates anoraks amongst you, but do pick it up. That's probably one of the documents that was referred to in that meeting on Friday, Laura. I'm also expecting ERD 22-23 guidance either this week or next week, plus the supporting small business and the new transitional relief scheme as well. And just turning to grants, obviously we're now in a plan B scenario. There's talk even of a plan D. I'm not aware of any new grants at the moment. Don't know what happened to C, but that's beside the point. We went from Delta to Omicron, wherever it's called. But there are no awareness of grants at the moment. But for those of us with the misfortune to do grants, we'll know we're getting a number of requests from reconciliations and post-assurance work on the grants, which is really going overboard from what they originally told us. But trust me, we've gone through it too as well.
Okay, well, we spoke last week that the government is going to want its money back. So.
They will go big hand for that. So do make sure you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's is what I'd say.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Kevin. Just moving on now. A quick update on fraud and error. I know we spoke about fraud and error and all of that last week, but there was a bit of an update actually today. So the government made an announcement today that it's making £510 million cash injection to the DWP to help it crack down on fraud. The press release was rather light on detail beyond the headline, but we understand they will invest the money into around 2,000 trained specialists who will review claims by carrying out property checks, following up on earning declarations for self-employed claimants, and cross-checking bank details. I don't know. This seems to be wallpaper money, is it?
Well, it would be useful if they spent some money on error rather than fraud as well.
Yeah, they've made no attempt here to try and differentiate today in terms of fraud or error. It's just fraud as far as they're concerned. But it looks to me like this is going to be used as a crackdown to recover more taxpayers' money, I think.
Well, some of it's going to be really quite interesting, because the bit about checking the earning declarations of self-employed claimants really seems to cut across what HMRC is supposed to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I found this quite sort of interesting in terms of it just seemed to be announcement of money, but not really announcement really of anything in particular. But Naomi, do you think any of it's going to head out towards the local authorities?
Oh, don't get me started on this. It does seem, bolting a certain door after some equines have bolted. I think local authorities did a really good job over many, many decades, preventing fraud in housing benefits, and robustly pursuing individuals and landlords and what have you. It's now we do fraud and error reflectively, depending on what data DWP give us. We're expected to do VEP and HBAA and HBMS, etc. I think some of the data they give us is useful, but it's not massively useful. I think a lot of fraud is identified locally with local officers, with local knowledge. And I don't think that there's been much publicity from DWP about what endeavours they have done locally. So there is very little publicity, which is a shame. And, looking at self-employed, my HBMS requirement of doing self-employed HBMSs is something like 30% more than the total number of self-employed claims I've got. So that has resulted in many referrals for HBMS for self-employed for the same poor punter. And I think that's getting to the point of being persecution. Anyway, enough of me.
It's yeah, but I think it just is this kind of theme, isn't it? I mean, the DWP, lost more money. Originally the biggest fraud committed by organised crime against government sat with tax credits. And when the tax credit system started on a Monday, and then they closed it down around about Thursday because organised fraudsters were taking so much money out of the system and using the identities of DWP staff to do it, which was always impressive. But actually, the universal credit fraud, the organised crime one, that now has sort of gone past the tax credit one. So, there's a report out that just says that universal credit system is just not capable of preventing fraud. And I guess, Gareth, the problem with that is not only does it not prevent organised fraud, but it also tends to agitate around the error side of things as well, because it's much easier to make mistakes.
It's very easy to make mistakes. I have to say that I'm not terribly aware of how you might defraud it, or else I might be ringing you from the Caribbean rather than from a grey South Wales.
I am in the Caribbean.
Well, you probably know more about fraud than I do then, Malcolm. But I won't call that an accusation. the system is cumbersome, and the checks are cumbersome. Now, the way that they applied make it virtually impossible for advisors to work with universal credit. There isn't any kind of implied consent system that works. People have to try and get physically to the same place as the client in order to be able to talk to the universal credit people. The journals must be open to fraud because they are retrospectively editing them. You still have the situation where somebody gets the wrong amount of universal credit paid in 1 month, and when it's corrected, they don't just put a correction in for the following period, they go back and edit the first period so that it looks as if it was right all along. Now, if you've got a system that allows you to do that, you must have a system that's open to fraud.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz, this feels like history repeating itself.
Yes, I think the statement that came out, as you say, yesterday, or actually today, it's so light on detail, isn't it? I mean, it looks just like we're looking at this, we're putting money into it, we're doing this, we're going to protect your taxpayers' money, but really, how? And I mean, how many investigators are they? Trained investigators? How many are they looking for?
2,000.
2,000.
Yeah.
And what is the universal credit caseload?
Oh, no idea.
4.5 million.
Yeah. And also, Gareth is quite right. I mean, is that the money? Presumably, the amount left in put down to fraud is also error. So, where does the cleanup come there? Very, very important. I seem to remember a long time ago, it really was a long time ago, because somebody said to me that, of course, as things go on, everything is open to fraud and actually to error on both sides, on claimant side. And I mean, we started off with supplementary benefits. Sorry, my dears, to go back that far, where everybody was interviewed. It's a little bit more difficult to say, well, I'm only earning this and I haven't got any pay slips if you're sitting opposite somebody who's interviewing you. Then we moved over to postal claims. Then they thought we all thought, I suppose, that postal claims were a bit dodgy. Then we tightened that up by actually looking at how we ask the questions. And now, of course, you have, pretty much everything online. I mean, I could create a claim now, couldn't I, from home? And I'd probably do a very good job at getting money that I shouldn't have. But the other interesting point, actually, which goes back a long way, is the fact that a lot of the systems we operate are actually fairly easy if you know what you're doing, and if you have, the required IT skills. They're quite easy to manipulate internally. I'm not saying that's got to be true of universal credit too.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
I mean, that's my thoughts on it, but I will have to see what materialises. But I do think it'll have an effect on local office. I mean, obviously, you're going to have lots of stopping, starting, changing.
So I guess probably, Laura, the question for you is that if local authorities' CTR schemes are largely passporting in people into CTR if they're on universal credit, then isn't this just passporting in the fraud into the CTR scheme?
Yes.
And the error, of course, as well.
Yes, I mean, there's two schools of thought, isn't there? Whenever you're looking at fraud, is how much does it cost to chase it down in relation to speed of administration? So, yes, we can go and check the national insurance number, do all those normal DWP checks that they do for universal credit, assume that universal credit and the government have done a proper job, and then we come along a bit later and find out that actually the person's got 25 grand in a shoebox under their bed full of money. And then we have to unpick everything, and then we have a load of council tax that we need to collect. correct. We then notify them that obviously this person shouldn't be getting anything. We then get told, actually, no, you're not allowed to tell us that. It's not your claim in the first place. And we waste our time. I would argue very strongly that we shouldn't be doing that, but then I'm an ex-fraud officer. I strongly believe that we shouldn't be using the DWP data, because I don't think, with the amount of error in universal credit following the COVID, that we should be taking anything that they send us as correct, and we should be having a robust position in place. And from an external auditor's point of view, you know, it's council's money. That discount from the council is collectible debt as such, and you know, we've got no grants coming in from the government. We need to make sure we apply our discounts correctly as we do normal council tax discounts.
Yeah, I guess probably that half a million that they're getting is going to probably be concentrated on recovery, I think, rather than.
Absolutely.
On that subject, of course, there's a picture of a fraudster here down at the bottom, because he hasn't revealed to us that he's working at Christmas, makes an awful lot of money.
Isn't that you, Malcolm?
So,
No, he makes an awful lot of money all year round.
What a fraudster.
Right, okay. So I just thought I would find this one. This came out last week. We didn't have a chance to talk about this, but I thought it was worth adding, particularly because of the previous one, which is over the pandemic, the DWP recruited some 13,500 work coaches. Basically, they doubled the number of work coaches that they normally have. And now they've reported to the Work and Pensions Committee that they are looking at not renewing their contracts when it comes round to next June. So do we think some of those work coaches may end up as fraud officers?
Well, you can bet that Cheapy won't apply, because it didn't apply for local housing benefit officers wishing to work for universal credit.
No. I mean, I just find it a bit sort of remarkable. I mean, this is a large number of people as well that, you know, are at risk. I know they're saying they're going to hang on, but the argument is, because the number of people that are claiming universal credit, they are expecting to drop over the next year. Is that what you would expect, Gareth?
I would expect it to go up. I mean, it will drop because of the people that come off universal credit who are on it solely because of the COVID bit. But they're running a big campaign to get people to move voluntarily onto UC. That will probably have more effect than it would have done, because they've changed the tapers and increased the work allowances UC, but they haven't done anything similar in legacy benefits. And of course, the general migration by change of circumstances is going to go on as well. I guess my forecast for 2022 is going to be, well, what happens if COVID continues and they have to reintroduce the kind of furlough schemes and the support for self-employed people that generated so many UC claims this year?
I think we've got a question from Paul. Nick, if you want to.
Yeah, Paul's asking. Oh, I think Kevin's responding to it in the text. Do you want to say that out loud, Kevin?
Yeah, basically, for discretionary reliefs and discounts, you can only apply for the previous preceding year, financial year, until the 3rd of September. So I actually meant to say, and sorry if I didn't, that you, for 2021 now, any application you get in, you can't award for 2021. 22 is absolutely fine, because you can go back to the 30th of November. Obviously, if you need to remove it, that's a different picture all told. Obviously, you can't do it on any, and that would need legislation, I'm told, to change it, and there's no plans to change that. Hope that answers the query.
I assume it does, doesn't it, Nick? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, if that doesn't, then obviously follow up in the message.
And
if anyone wants to come on to me, as all go through you guys, I'm happy with that.
And I see Kirsty at Hammersmith and Fulham has made us aware of a critical cybersecurity vulnerability. So I suggest everybody reads Kirsty's note there in the messages. Okay, it's just about 12:31. We'll finish off this last session because it's the last session of the year in a more traditional fashion. That's not a virtual conga, you'll be pleased to know. But I was wondering, what are your predictions for 2022? Liz, can we start with you? I'm interested in what are going to be the big ticket items for services, demands from the bosses and elected members, the DWP, new technology, COVID, anything you want to predict on.
Malcolm?
Yes.
Just had an email come through. One of my team members have just attended the test and trace meeting, and they are now exploring it being extended past March.
Okay, so your predictions then, Laura?
I'm going to jump off a bridge. This is
Malcolm?
ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is not benefit money. They have got to stop this, the government.
Malcolm, COVID is going to continue. I think test and trace is likely to continue. As I said earlier on, they mentioned about Plan D rather than just Plan B, because I think this is going to take off in the new year. So I think we're going to end up doing, as we have been doing, a lot more work, probably not totally recognised in all authorities. And we'll struggle to do the day-to-day stuff because the financial side will dry up from the government, and we'll find it a struggle to keep paying. And can I say what the panel predicting for 2022? Retirement.
You won't be able to afford to retire, Kevin. The living will be too high.
Trust me, I will.
Okay, Gareth, what's your predictions for next year?
Well, given that my attempts at fraud will no doubt fail and I won't be able to live your luxury lifestyle, I'm predicting that I'll still be banging away doing the same kind of thing. I think, as Kevin says, yeah, COVID will continue, and that will probably mean the reintroduction and extension of the support schemes in terms of people needing to access things like UC and CTR. Longer term, give me 2 years, and I think there's a really interesting bit which I haven't heard mentioned at all around kind of the benefits world, which is a thing called MTD, which is making tax digital, and it's a big issue in the accountancy world, and I suspect that we're going to find an opportunity in it for particularly self-employed cases where they're going to be in a much more digital world in terms of their data and their information. And that if we take advantage of that and start pulling it in and integrating the digital tax data and the digital earnings data into kind of benefits administration, there's an opportunity there.
I agree, Kevin. Sorry, Gareth. And Kevin, there will be some challenges there, won't there? Because local authorities aren't that keen on doing that sort of integration, even though it's quite sensible to do so.
Authorities say they're doing integration, but I think the speed with which they're doing it and everything else is, so I think there is going to be a lot of challenges. And I think most of my fellow colleagues would actually curl up when we mentioned data protection and GDPR officers who seem to want to stop everything in local authorities from us ever doing anything. Can I say mine is quite good? So just in case you're recording this. I also think, whilst you're predicting for 2022, you ought to put on record the work that Revs and Bens have done in 2021, 22. There is no respite to this. It's incessant, and I think it will continue. But it should be applauded for the work they've done, helping people with COVID, but doing the day-to-day work. And if you look at collection rates, you look at benefit processing figures, as well as the grants that have actually all been done. I don't think any other service in the council could have done what that team has done. So well done to everybody. But yeah, I don't think I can see any respite to this at all.
I think in this age of levelling up and boogieing down departments, it's local authorities don't get the recognition for having now done really 2 years of.
Well, I did see a report last week, Malcolm, where Michael Gove was looking at the restructure of local government bowl accounts. So is that the one wedged in the corner? Why have they got rid of the title local government? You heard it here first.
But there's not going to be any kind of changes to anything, is there, over the next year in that sense, because of the time it takes to do it. This must be gearing up for the next general election, manifesto promises, I would assume.
I wouldn't rule anything out, because with COVID on the news, it's a good time to get bad news out, or good news, or whatever. So I wouldn't rule anything out. And it does seem to be sometimes when you least expect it, where they hit you with stuff.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree with you. It probably is more towards the next manifesto. They're looking for the next commitments to make in respect of that. And I'm told that there's tax cuts being considered as well.
But we'll see the broad brushstrokes, I think, over the next year, won't we?
Yeah, but you've got to remember, this is a government that probably likes to get things out into the wider domain, whether they're leaked or whatever, see what the feedback is on it, and then decide to act on whatever that feedback is. And I see parts of the panel are nodding their heads in agreement. It's very much a government that does seem to put ideas out, and then when they do come out, very much probably taken on board 1 or 2 comments, but largely as they sort of outlined.
Okay.
On the other hand, the tax cut that's been floated that I've seen has been the abolition of the 45% highest rate, and I suspect that wouldn't affect too many benefit claimants.
Let's hope not. Otherwise, we'll be talking about fraud again.
I'm just going to say.
Liz, let's bring you in, because I know.
Right. Okay. I don't have too much to add. I was going to mention what Kevin has just mentioned about the reorganisation of whatever we're going to call it, local government or something different, which seems to be, certainly from what I've read, fairly wide ranging. But the one thing I think is quite interesting is my own opinion is that over the last couple of months, and I don't want to sound like some right-wing conspiracy theorist, but I do think COVID has sort of been weaponized in many ways. And I think next year it will continue to be so. Do you see what I mean? Or am I falling completely on deaf ears?
No, you're not falling on deaf ears. But broaden that a little bit, Liz.
I thought you were going to ask me to do that. Well, I'm thinking, I suppose what I'm really thinking about is whether or not, I suppose to a certain extent it is a bit of considerate, but let's face it, we are all now rushing around trying to get our 3rd booster jab. And it seems to me that COVID is sort of being used, shall we say, to perhaps cover many ills.
I'm in agreement there with you, Liz. I think that COVID's being used to cover up Brexit.
Well, yes, so do I. I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to mention that word because it's Christmas. But I think
never stopped me before.
No, I think it's being used to. That's what I mean by weaponized. I think it's slightly being used as a weapon to cover up many ills and probably cover up many changes. You've only got to look at the crime bill. I don't want to go into that because I just think there are so many more things that are going to be damaging to this country, which has got really nothing to do with benefits or local authority administration, except it does touch it on the periphery.
Okay.
I still think also that there will be more, much as everybody said, there will be more discretionary pots for local authorities to manage without any recognition of whether or not they have the wherewithal to do that.
Okay, thanks for that, Liz. I'm going to get you to mute because of the echo on that.
Am I still echoing? It doesn't. I can't hear it. You say.
Yeah, it's certainly at my end. It's very echoey. Yeah. Right, Naomi. Last-ish word from you.
I'll touch briefly on something that Kevin said about the impact on staff. I think, and it sounds like COVID mitigation is continuing with self-isolation payments. There's the MCC grants I know that we've got it coming up, but that's going to be going next year. I think the impact on staff, particularly in revenues and benefits, has been immense, and not just with dealing with SIPs and business grants. There's been quite a lot of changes in legislation in benefits, and rapid spikes in CTR claims. I think this is, whilst it may prompt some to retire, it sadly might prompt some to go off sick. I think we've been very, very resilient this past 18 months, but I think it's getting to a tipping point for many. I think new technology, yeah, whether you buy new technology or not, I think we all need to look at what we have got and to exploit it to its maximum, to automate as much as you possibly can. I appreciate Laura's saying about looking at fraud and error in council tax reduction, but with the dwindling housing benefit caseload, that's going to be quite a costly thing on what is about, I suppose, on average, a quarter of what you'd pay out in housing benefit. So that ends up being quite a costly thing. So I'm not saying whether you ignore fraud and error, but you try and deal with your CTR caseload to minimise fraud and error, and a little bit of shrugging your shoulders for low level. I don't know. I think it's a risk-based approach that local authorities are going to have to get into in many areas.
Or more compliance and prevention, really, I guess, is what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of said for compliance as opposed to investigation. Okay, on that basis, I just really wanted to pick up on one thing. Jake, I can see the conversation going on about this IT problem. Are you able to sort of enlighten us on this?
Well, yeah, there's been an announcement about this Log4j. It's part of the web servers that people use if you're connecting different services together via APIs. There might be an issue with the way you've got your server set up. But this is something that was actually released, not publicly, but it's been on the radar for a while. Because what security people tend to do is they release it internally to sort of vendors and stuff, and people are made aware of it. But yeah, it is a major issue, and as we've had comments in the chat already from Elizabeth Marlowe saying that they've had to actually turn off their self-service and e-claims just to make sure that there are no issues with that. It's each individual company will have to deal with it in whichever way they specifically for their own web services. We're quite lucky in the sense that we don't use the affected version, but there's a lot of companies out there exchanging data that will have this Apache sort of web service software is very, very popular across the entirety of the internet. So I mean, I've been emailing and discussing for the last week or so, but this morning it's really hotted up. So it's something that's on everybody's card. So if you want some support on other issues from your vendors, you might not be able to get through to them for the next few days, as there are various things that need to be done, patches that need to be run. It could be quite a bad one. And I'm not sure obviously how long some vendors have their services down for, but we haven't been affected, and we
Okay, so that doesn't sound like something anybody wants turning up at this stage of the game with everything else going on. Okay, can I thank Kirsty for bringing that to our attention and giving us the opportunity to discuss that. It's 12:45, so we're going to finish now. My only prediction for next year is that I suspect before 2022 is out, we'll have a new Prime Minister, and I believe it will be the cheese lady, Liz Truss. So be afraid, be very afraid. On that basis, can I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and look forward to seeing you all in January. Have a great time. Thank you.
Yeah, Nadolig, a Merry Christmas.
Yep, thank you everyone.
Here's to 2022, folks. All the best.